actually be?
We made it. Hello! Hello!
I wonder if anybody hates that part at the beginning
I'm
of our
sure that they
videos.
do. I'm sure they do. I apologize to anybody who does, but I'm a dork. I'm a dork.
It's not her fault.
We
it's just
had
technology.
We had technical difficulties.
So
I
many.
borrowed a really fancy camera and a microphone so that you could see us better. Maybe you don't want to see us better, but at least you can hear us.
Got their hair done.
And yeah, we got our hair done and everything.
Yeah.
So we're very sorry that we're 20 minutes late with the Facebook Live. Hello, let's just dive right in.
Okay.
Welcome to our post-election Facebook Live. My name is Karen Boite. This is
Kirby-McIntosh.
And the pretty lady over there,
Laura Kirby-McIntosh.
We felt that it would be a good idea to check the temperature out in the community. There's been a massive change at Queen's Park, and the Premier is likely working very diligently on forming his new team. So while the provincial government has changed, the OAC has not.
No change.
We're still here. We will work with or protest any government that is holding the reins. It's really up to them. Our agenda is to help, or in some cases compel, our government to do better for people with autism in Ontario. So we at the OAC send our congratulations to Premier Ford, and we've sent him a tweet as the first step that we hope will be the beginning of an open dialogue. Those of you on Twitter, we hope that you'll share this tweet that Laura sent out yesterday, right? Okay. I have some pre-submitted questions that I'm going to ask Bruce. Thank you to those of you who sent us questions. Before I start, I want people to get to know Bruce a little bit better.
This is the scary part.
This is the scary part that he's not prepared for.
It's Bruce's coming out party.
Oh, I'm prepared. I'm not sure that any of you folks.
So I'm going to ask him about what he plans to do this summer. I'm also going to ask him a little bit about our work with the previous Liberal government, and in particular the collaboration with the Ministry of Education and MCYS. So, Bruce, and this is Laura. We'll get to Laura, but we're going to talk to Bruce first.
Take a number.
Hello, Carla. Okay, so Bruce, let's charge on. Okay, because it's late at night. We're going to try to keep this in under an hour. And if you can't watch tonight, we hope that you will another time. We're going to give you a little bit of perspective on the OAC in addition to what we plan to do with relations to the new government. So, Bruce, how long have you been working with the OAC?
We were founded 13 years ago in April.
In April?
Of this year. 13 years and 3 months.
And Laura? How long have you been hanging out with the OAC?
I guess that long.
About that long.
Yeah, he has the Aspie-like memory. I just sort of vaguely know it's been a long, long time.
So, are you a paid staff member?
Nope.
Do we have any paid staff members?
Nope.
So, this is a kitchen. We're sitting here at a dining room table. This is a dining room table, kitchen table collective of people. No staff, no budget.
No
From
office.
time to time, we hire students when we get a grant. And that's about it, right?
Yep.
Okay. So why the OAC, Bruce?
Because things weren't going terribly well back in 2005. There was a court case that was trying to get the government to lift an age cutoff. Sound familiar? Oh my God. And get services into schools. And while Dalton McGuinty, when he was running for Premier, said that he would do these things, once he got elected, he continued to defend against the lawsuit. And even when the lawsuit won in lower court and told him to do those things, he appealed it. So we kind of had to go to town in the court of public opinion, and that was the start of the OAC.
I think that another part of the story was that the other organizations that were on the ground doing things for the autism community were not doing political advocacy as aggressively as we thought it needed to be done. And coming out of a political background, which we both do, we thought that was something we could bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. What made you start to organize protests, and who was in power at the time? You mentioned Dalton McGuinty.
Yeah.
Is that when it all started?
Yeah. Why did we do protests?
Yeah, why?
Politicians see the light when they feel the heat.
It works.
That's real simple. Okay.
That's, yeah.
So,
plus it's fun.
Plus, it's fun.
Is it ever?
It is
So
fun.
fun.
For you guys, I don't find it fun. I don't find it fun. I find it stressful.
It can be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's certainly members watching that, find it very cathartic, the cheering and the chanting and the speeches and all that kind of stuff. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but, as people that had worked inside government, we knew that, that's what we needed to do to get their attention.
Yeah.
And when we did one rally, we got a little bit of local media, and then we did another one, and then we did another one. And once we hit 5, we got a call from the minister's office.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we realized, okay, we've got a formula here that works. And by the time we were done, I think we hit about 24 or 25. And this was all like 2005 to 2009.
It was more than that, because a lot of times we had more than one on the same day.
Tell me about McGuinty.
Well, I was just thinking about good old McGuinty, because that was one of the funnest things. And Laura made me throw him out when we moved, and I was kind of sad about having to part with the poor guy.
Tell us about McGuinty.
McGuinty was a life-size plywood cutout of Dalton McGuinty, holding one of our "No More Excuses" signs. And through Dalton's nose came a he was on casters, and a broom handle would come out of his nose. And I would interview him, and my buddy Dan would get down behind him and push him along the ground and answer the questions. And of course, with every answer, the broom handle came out just a little bit further.
It was a Pinocchio thing, if you're
yeah.
They get it. They get it. So at one time, Sir Bruce, you were what we would call a political insider.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? And in particular,
well, how much do you tell?
Well,
okay,
as much as you want to tell.
First up, this is a nonpartisan organization, and we have members and people on our board who have been members of different parties, like as in members, not just supporters, but people with an actual party card. So there's no loyalty or endorsement of any one party. In fact, during the campaign, we put out a list of candidates, not as an endorsement, but as a recognition that they've been helpful to us in the past, that they've been open to listening to us, they've done good things to help us. And that contained people out of all 3 of the, at the time, the elected parties.
Yeah. Everybody knows. But where did you start?
Well, I have been a conservative since I was in high school. Had a party card in my wallet. Managed more campaigns than I could count. I would have to sit down with a calendar.
So you managed political campaigns for candidates?
Worked my way up. Started on the sign campaign when I was 14. I held the staple gun.
Various levels of government?
Primarily provincial. Staffed provincially. I was chief of staff for a cabinet minister under the Eves government. That was a highly educational experience, because I'd been a spear carrier for years and years, and then I became part of the Palace Guard, and that was very different.
So let me ask you about that. In particular, what happens behind the scenes when a new government is elected and they have to set up shop? What's the process?
Well, first things first, the leader of the party appoints what is called a transition team. And these are the people who set up the meetings with the existing set of cabinet ministers and coordinate sort of a handoff, at least as well as they're able. Sometimes these things work very cooperatively, sometimes they don't. I hear that it's going well this time, but there's no choice in the matter of doing it. But it's just a chance for people to get together and just talk about, these are the issues that we've been facing. You're going to be getting the same stuff. Here's who we've been dealing with, good, bad, or indifferent.
It was a long time ago that you were the guy behind the scenes. But can you recall approximately how long it took before people set up their constituency offices and hired their staff and were ready to go with the work of government?
Right. So that's going to vary a lot this time, because there are 17 new seats. And that's people whose the area that they represent hasn't had its own member before. So for the ones that are going back to Queen's Park, they've already got an office. even if it was from someone in another party, they just take over the digs. But for the new ones, they've got to go find a space, typically go get a real estate agent and see what's available for rent. It's got to conform to, some of the requirements for accessibility and the rent.
Right. So it's safe to say that they're not going to be hitting the ground running right away.
They won't be open on Monday. No.
They'll be open on Monday.
Yeah. Some will be better than others. I know that. I mean, there are going to be members who are more than happy to answer their own phones and aren't going to feel that they need to necessarily wait for staff. But that means, you're going to have to publish a cell phone number, and that isn't always necessarily a comfortable thing to do for the member personally. So it is going to vary a lot.
I want to ask you about, if you can tell me a moment in time when you realized that you switched teams, that you went from being an establishment guy, the guy behind the scenes, to an activist.
Was there one single moment? It's been a slow and steady progress.
Okay, we'll ask you the same question.
If I had to put it down to one thing, and you're probably going to get a cramp when I say it, but Frank Cleese, of all people, Who's
Frank Cleese?
Frank Cleese was a member of the Harris and Eves governments. He was a cabinet minister under those two premiers. He was also on the Provincial Party executive with me between 1990 and 95. He's generally considered as quite a bit of a right winger. He was a Ford supporter during the leadership. Okay. But we did a Rogers Cable show together, and as we were wrapping up the thing, he had said to me, and this was after, of course, the Conservatives were in opposition, and he was still helpful to us. But he said, you really got to focus on getting all three parties lined up. He said, you got to have your ducks in a row. And I realized that kind of had to be a little bit out of any one corner and kind of in the middle of the ring dealing with all of them.
So when did you morph into becoming an activist?
When I realized how stupid the problems were with the old IBI program.
Okay.
And who set up that IBI program, Bruce?
Well, it was that Conservative government. And the way that I learned about it, when I was working for Tina, my minister sat on the Health and Social Services Cabinet Committee. And I saw lots of purple pages of briefing notes for cabinet and cabinet committees go through our office.
What does that mean, purple pages?
They make the pages a very dark color of purple that makes them very, very difficult to photocopy.
Is that what they do for secrets?
Yeah, it's confidential cabinet stuff.
Confidential stuff.
So and they're all numbered and numbered in several different ways. In fact, but it's basically the.
So is there a moment when you clicked and you thought, what? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but not very many people go from being a well-paid person who's working for a very well-established party to working for free as a full-time advocate.
Yeah. So while I was working there,
usually the other way around. Yeah.
While I was working there, our son was diagnosed with autism. And what I was seeing in those cabinet briefing notes was dramatically different from what Laura and I were experiencing in the real world trying to get help for Cliff.
Okay.
It just didn't match up.
Okay. And
when I started digging, and it's nice to be a chief of staff because you can get lots of information just brought to your office. But I started making requests for some of the background documents and things, and very quickly being, a numbers nerd, some people would have it. I started to see what was going on.
I'll take you off a hot seat.
That's okay.
Take you off the hot seat. Laura, you had a reaction to that question. So was there a moment? Now, you are a teacher now.
I am.
By profession, but at one time you too were a behind-the-scenes person.
I was
for the Harris government. Correct.
So this will shock some of our viewers, but I met Bruce on a leadership campaign for PC party leader. I got involved in politics when I was about 16, and kind of never looked back. Got the bug and started, working on campaigns and going to conventions and meeting this guy and working on more campaigns and moving to Ottawa and working for a federal cabinet minister there and working on more campaigns. At one point, I ran for president of the Ontario PC Youth Association. And everything was great because I was young and ideological and I was right and everybody else was wrong. But then our son was born. And then for the first time ever in my life, I needed something from government more than my driver's license or my passport. I needed services. And for all of our political privilege and educational privilege and all the advantages that we had, we were running into brick walls. And I mean, we were coming from a place where, when Cliff was first diagnosed, we were like, oh, well, we'll just call up Tony Clement. He's a friend of ours. He's the Minister of Health. He'll know what to do. And literally, we went to a meeting and figured one meeting and it'd be done and dusted. And he was like, well, I'll talk to somebody. I'll see what I can do. And then that government collapsed and the Liberals came in and we were like, oh, crap. We don't have any friends or connections. So we're going to have to do this differently. And I don't know. I don't have a clear memory of when we decided to start organizing protests. But I do know the moment when...
Oh, I do. It was the day in the House when they announced the appeal.
True. That's right. The appeal of the Weinberg case, for those of you that are legal nerds.
So there was a class action lawsuit, the one that I referred to earlier, that was trying to get the government to actually do what they said they would do in the 2003 campaign. And the parents won. And it was just one of those, oops, somebody hit the wrong button. The decision was actually released a day early by mistake out of the Superior Court office. And it came out on a Friday instead of a Monday, but what that did was it gave the Liberal government a chance to prepare an appeal document, which they filed on the Monday morning, the very next business day. And of course, the legislature came back, and Shelley Martel, who was a New Democrat member that was really going to bat for us, just, wow, Money Taylor.
And then some, which is saying a lot.
Shelley was just amazing.
Still is.
But she absolutely went to town on the government in question period on that Monday morning. A bunch of us were there. Somehow they found out that the appeal was coming. There was a gang of us up in the galleries, and it didn't even fizz on the government. I remember Jim Bradley, now the former member for St. Catharines, just leaning back in his chair and waving his hand dismissively and just saying, move on. And I just about lost it.
You don't like him when he's angry.
Oh, there was
you
a
don't
gang
like
of us
Bruce when he's angry.
We went down.
Can I interrupt you? Can we push on?
I
know. I'm sorry, but I want to keep it moving. So we've been talking for 15 minutes, and I want to get to people's questions. But I thought it would be valuable for. I was certainly surprised when I learned about Laura and Bruce's background, and suffice it to say, it is nothing remotely close to mine, and yet. We are very much on the same page in almost every issue. So I fully believe and can say truthfully that the OAC is a nonpartisan organization. Every single person in the board votes the way they choose, and we are not all on the same page when it comes to the bigger picture with politics, that's for sure.
I should point out for the record that I recently bought a membership in a political party. And it's not the Conservatives.
Yeah. And certainly, I think it's safe to say in your youth, you and I were not at the same protests.
We weren't.
Yeah. Okay, so
not at all.
That's ancient history. I'm going to very quickly ask both Bruce and Laura to talk about recent history. We had an unprecedented relationship with Michael Couteau and the Ministry of MCYS, Ministry of Children and Youth Services. As a result of a colossal mistake that the Liberal government made in trying to cut services for children over the age of 5. And we went nuts and fought and won a battle with them. But they had to clean up the mess. Yeah. And so this guy here was heavily involved with helping them do that. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Michael Couteau and some of the meetings you had, some of the unprecedented access that you had with the previous administration? And
yeah, there were a number of very unusual things about the process that was used to overhaul the autism program. I think one of the most notable was the level of parent involvement, which actually Couteau increased once he became minister. He added 2 additional people to the committee.
Thank you, Michael.
Who were parents. He took that very seriously. The other thing was the level of design input that we had in the end was very, very different from what it was looking like at the beginning. And when I say that, it was actually Tracy McCharles, Couteau's predecessor, who was, as they say, thrown under the bus, who appointed the first group of members to the committee. And the mandate letter that we got said that we had no authority to make decisions. In the end, I have to say, we made a lot of decisions that were just accepted at face value and implemented. The committee could have written some of those news releases and announcements that were made. And it was an iterative process. The way that government programs often get vetted by stakeholders is some of the civil servants come to those stakeholder groups and they say, here, this is what we have. What do you think? And that is exactly not what happened in this case. And it was, we were doing things differently. It took us a while to kind of find our sea legs on that, the new normal.
And this is the implementation committee that you're talking about, right?
Yeah, and she was asking more about your relationship with the minister.
Oh, with Michael Couteau.
Because what I'm getting at is that it is possible to have a direct line to very powerful politicians if you approach them the right way and if you have something to offer.
Yeah.
Well,
if you're fortunate enough to have a collaborative person.
Well, and that's what I think the OAC does best. I mean, we've established our sort of street cred as a political protest group. And they know that we can mobilize large numbers of people, or sometimes even just small numbers of people at multiple locations. But there's lots of people who do.
SEAL Team 6.
we in 2016 we had a Facebook group called Special Ops. Like we got really into it.
Yeah.
But there's lots of groups that do protests pretty well.
Sure.
What we do is once we get their attention, then we know how to go inside the building. And because Bruce and I both worked in government, we speak the language. You know, I can't be fooled by, you know, the person who comes to the door 10 minutes before the meeting is scheduled to end and say, oh, minister, you know, your 3 o'clock is coming up. I used to be that person. So, you know, they can't pull stuff over on us. So once we get in the building and we say, look, if you want to make us stop doing the protesting, this is what we want. And I think one of the biggest compliments we ever got was after a briefing we did with an MPP, and he said, you know, I like you guys. You don't just come in here and tell us what we're doing wrong. You tell us how to fix it, and you show us that you want to work with us. And that's the way I want us to continue to be, whoever is in power. Just and in fact, we're going to reverse that process this time. We're going to try to go in and get the meetings first. Yeah. And play nice and play ball and frame the issues that we want to bring forward in language that I think conservatives will warm to very quickly. But if that doesn't work well, we know what to do next.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to people's questions, but just as an FYI, I'm going to approach Michael Couteau and see if he's willing to do a Facebook Live with us now. Wow. He's no longer minister. He's also a member of a party that no longer has official party status.
And he's also someone that may be interested in a bigger leadership position sometimes.
I don't know. So he can say no, of course, but I think it'd be very interesting to see if he'd be willing now to speak as openly as possible about what happened and what his point of view was. And we could ask him. So I think a lot of people might be interested. We'll see if he says yes. Okay, so let's go on to our questions, right?
Sure.
So Brent, great question, Brent. Have we got any possible meetings yet with the Premier or any of his lieutenants, Brent says. I'm curious if we have been able to start with some baby steps with getting lines of communication open to the new government.
We are going to get one with, at the very least, the policy assistant that carries our file and the director of policy. We don't have a date set yet. That is my second phone call tomorrow morning. I have asked that the Premier, at least the Premier designate, at least stick his nose in for 10 or 15 minutes, because I think there's got to be a meeting the minds somewhere there, and as early as possible. So we've let them know both directly and in the media that we're not terribly happy with the fact that we didn't get some FaceTime earlier on. Other organizations did. I think that I will be charitable. I now understand how that got set up. I think it was just an oversight on the part of the fellow who did it, who was not, at the time, neither a staffer nor a member. So it just kind of came about.
It's a lot of work to get people to understand how important these issues are.
Well, and one of the easiest things, I was thinking before we went live tonight about like all of our members that are sitting out there going, okay, give me something to do. I want to do something. One of the best things that you can do is, if you don't already have Twitter, join it. Follow us at Ontario Autism Coalition. And there's a tweet that we've sent out. If you scroll down, you can find it. It's a congratulatory tweet to Doug Ford on winning the election and asking him to sit down and meet with us. And if you can retweet that tweet and then add in the name of your local MPP, whether they're Conservative or New Democrat or Liberal, but just amplify that. And we're also tweeting it at some members of Ford's inner circle. It's a small thing, but it's a way to get their attention.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Twitter actually has a huge impact. Our friend David Lepofsky at the AODA Alliance relies almost exclusively on Twitter and has great success with it.
Brent also asks, will the OAC, Ontario Autism Coalition, that's us, be approaching them, the government, with savings costs through the DFO and loosening more regional control over funding for the OAP? I know Bruce has lots to say about that.
That's a big yes.
I.e., I'm still hearing regionals telling parents they don't need to take DSO because there's they need to take DSO because there's no money left in DFO. So we're at 30 minutes. We're at 30 minutes.
Okay. So first of all,
quick.
We already have. Okay, Sharon Gavison and I did a caucus briefing for the Conservatives over a year and a half ago, and at the time we outlined what the problems were with direct funding versus direct service at every level, not just the effectiveness of the use of the money, but the flexibility for families. All of those issues have been made very clear to the people who were in the caucus before the election. We need to broaden that out somewhat to some of the people who are coming in. But even in those cases, we briefed Christine Elliott in those days, even though she wasn't a sitting member, as the patient ombudsman. she had some pull over two of the regional programs that operate out of hospitals, CHEO for Eastern Ontario and Ron Joyce at Hamilton Health Sciences for Hamilton Niagara. And so she's well aware. There are other members who, just by virtue of being touched by the issue. So, for example, Robin Martin, the new member for Eglinton Lawrence, who has an adult daughter on the spectrum, has been following this very closely. Amy Fee in Kitchener South Hespeler has a son and daughter on the spectrum. She's been involved with helping us along. Came to the protests 2 years ago. Like she's in it to win it. So there are other people who are in the mix, who are new members who will not maybe need as much of a briefing as some do. But we're going to get around, and as quickly as we can. One of the things that is going to determine the pecking order, of course, is the choices for cabinet. But that's not coming for another couple of weeks. So yes, we've raised the DFO thing, and yes, we have pointed out that guidelines aren't being followed, and there is a blatant conflict of interest on two levels. When the direct service agencies are in charge of intake, they are giving people advice that favors their own business before direct funded competitors. And
I think our members know that issue well.
Yeah. Now Faith asks something. She says, that's my current problem, but how can we address the issue? Faith, are you saying your current problem is that your regional provider is saying that DFOs are not available? Is that?
Yes, agencies saying there's no more money for DFO.
So if someone was to say that to you, Sir Bruce?
Well, you see, here's the problem. And it's that this was the second conflict of interest that I was coming to. Because the regionals have control over the money, they choose to spend it on themselves first. And they don't wait for parents to say what they want when they arrive at the list. They predetermine how many direct service or direct funding spaces there will be in their region. And having done that, they then go hire people and do things and write contracts on that basis. So it ties up the money. They shouldn't be doing it. They should never have been doing it. It's not what the guidelines tell them that they should do. But this is part of the problem when you've got that special status that has been given to them. They think they can get away with whatever the hell they want, and that's got to stop. I think that this particular government is very predisposed to do that. And I think that happens on a couple of levels. I think it doesn't just happen as a matter of good public policy, because they talk about accountability, they talk about effective use of the dollar, but it also happens on a gut level, a philosophical,
principle.
Yeah, lifeblood. Like, why should one agency get a sweetheart deal out of the government that puts them at a competitive advantage with private sector practitioners? So I think we have an argument that's going to fall on very fertile ground.
I've got a question for Megan. She asks, does Premier Ford have any names on tap for the Ministry of Community and Social Services, the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, or MCYS, or the Ministry of Education? Have you got any inside info?
The problem with having 75 people in your caucus is that you've probably got more than one name for any cabinet position.
Yeah. They're sure not sharing that with us.
There are.
We haven't made first contact yet.
Yeah,
that's where we're at.
Well, yeah, and the people who are going to get those cabinet posts are going to be the only ones that know that they're getting them right up until the morning of the swearing in.
Yeah.
They will be sworn to absolute secrecy, and if they blow that, they're blowing their careers.
Yeah, so we got to wait and see, Megan, right?
So it's a wait and see. There's lots of possibilities, and everybody's got a theory as to what's going to happen. Frankly, our approach is let's make sure that everybody's briefed and wait and see who actually lands in which role. Because one of the complexities about the autism file is it isn't just one ministry, right? It's children and youth. It's also, for the transition to adulthood, the Ministry of Community and Social Services, but it's also the Ministry of Education, because our kids go to school, and health, and it is an interministerial thing, and you've got to get the money to pay for it, which means it involves the Ministry of Finance in crafting a budget, and the management
Treasury
board to it's management board now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, management board.
Get with the times, lady. But anyway, it's not just one of these folks. We need them all.
Can I just add something? Because I want our members to be prepared for something that they may perceive as quite scary at first.
Mm-hmm.
But Ford has hinted that he'd like to run a smaller, leaner government. And that could mean taking the current size of the cabinet, which under the Liberals included 30 different ministries, and cutting that down to 20. I've heard maybe even as low as 15. Mm-hmm. That could mean, potentially, the end of the Ministry of Children and Youth Services in its current form.
Could mean, right?
This is a maybe.
You're speculating.
I'm speculating, but okay. I would not be surprised if, and I just want to remind our members that prior to the creation of Ministry of Children and Youth, all of the programs that we talk about used to be housed under the Ministry of Community and Social Services. So the cancellation of that ministry doesn't necessarily mean cuts, it just means programs will be moved and housed under a different title.
Right. Let me get you to put your speculation hat. Keep that on for a few minutes. Christina asks, is ABA a possibility in the schools? Is the OAP going to change now? And do we have to worry about funds being taken away or decreased?
All of those are really hard to answer at this point. I agree with Bruce that I think we've got a really good shot at not only defending the OAP as it has evolved to now, but also really dealing with the issues that we've been fighting for years on direct funding. What I don't have a read on is how this new government feels about ABA in schools. I felt under the previous Liberal government that it was a massive uphill battle with the Ministry of Education until we know who the minister is and until we get a read on their understanding of that issue. Yeah. It's way, way too early to say.
Yeah. It's very hard to speculate.
Can I offer a thought on that?
Yeah, sure.
It seems to me that a new government coming to power that is, as one of its top priorities, concerned with the effectiveness of the money that they spend, would, I think, be very smart to look at using that money in special education in the best way possible. Mm-hmm. And we know that teaching using ABA techniques is the most effective way to educate kids on the spectrum. QED, all of the research, all of what's done in other jurisdictions bears this out. So if you're going to spend money, spend it well, and that's going to be our argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, the thing that occurs to me is that when the last government tried to cut the funding for children over the age of 5, and it got a lot of attention. It hit the press. You know, it didn't just affect our community in terms of notoriety and really bad press. Yeah. So I kind of feel like a new government might not even want to go there. They might not want to awaken, us angry mothers and fathers once again. But with education, I don't know. Maybe I'm naive.
As a teacher, that's where I'm worried. I'm not as worried about the OAP as I am about the school system stuff. This is what I'm asking you,
because we have not made strides.
Not as many as we'd like.
Significant. I'm interrupting you, but the strides are certainly not as significant in the education system.
Well, and now we're starting all over again with the new government anyway. But here's what I do know.
Yeah.
If this government comes in and tries to bring in cuts to special education, cuts to EAs, or does anything to the special education funding formula that doesn't benefit kids with special needs, we will go to war.
Yeah.
And we will be joined in that war by all of the people that work in the education system. And we will have no problem getting support from teacher unions as we fight that. I will make one prediction. I think the first thing Ford will move on education will be the sex ed curriculum and the discovery math stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He will get some pushback on that from teachers groups, and that will kind of set the tone for what comes next, because we are coming into another round of collective bargaining for teacher contracts,
Mm-hmm.
and how Ford handles that is going to tell us a lot about how we go forward.
Right. Okay. We're at the 40-minute mark. We're going to try to keep this under an hour, so we've got 20 minutes to go. This is a question from Lisa. I want to read it, but maybe elaborate on it a little bit. Lisa says, I would like to know if the program will continue as it was under WIN, and if so, what are they doing to reduce wait times? So what I want to ask you about is, there are people who are newer to signing their kids up to the OAP who are feeling that stress of the wait times and going, what? Can you talk a little bit about the history of wait times and what's happening?
Oh my golly.
And how the list has been streamlined, but that probably doesn't mean much to somebody who's white-knuckling it and waiting for service to start. Can you, as quickly as you can?
As quickly as I can.
This is a very long and detailed history.
People back in the day were waiting 5 and 6 years. The only reason that we waited somewhere between 3.5 and 4, I think, is because my son and I were on the front page of the local newspaper and a number of other places raising holy hell, and they wanted to, throw us a bone and make us stop.
And how many years ago was that?
Look how well that worked.
How many years?
2005.
2005.
Yeah.
So for me, just a couple of years ago, I waited 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now,
wait times are now down to, depending on the region of the province, somewhere between 1 and 2, probably closer in most cases to 2 than 1. But there's more money coming into the system, and the Conservatives have promised more money on top of what the Liberal commitment was. But one thing I gotta try and help folks understand is that it's not just about money. If you get funding, you've got to have a place that you can spend it and that you can buy therapy for your kid. And that is increasingly difficult to find. There are areas of the province where there are not DFO providers at all. Northern Ontario is, well, they have 2 now that they didn't have 3 years ago. But that is a very slow thing to improve. So one of the things that I did speak to the guys in the policy shop about that 100 million was exactly that, and that they should earmark at least some of it for capacity building. There's a grant program that's been available for quite a long time. I'm actually having a phone meeting about it tomorrow morning, that would supply some money to people who wanted to get certified or increase their level of certification. Trouble was, you ready for the surprise, ladies?
okay.
It was only available to staff at the regional providers.
Gee, wonder why.
I'll just let that
Leave that
hang
there.
Let that sit.
Can I just
we need
scroll
to
through
fix
some
that,
comments?
and we need to
Yes.
get more people into the field.
We've got a few more questions, but so go Laura. Laura's going to
But just
respond.
before it scrolls away,
Yeah.
Chrissy is reminding people of where wait times have been and where they are now. And Miko is just reminding us that, and Miko, by the way, is one of the co-chairs of our Youth Advisory Committee.
Hey, dude.
Hey, is reminding us that people are worried about losing passport and ODSP funding. And I just want to say to that, again, that's another thing where, like, if they tried to touch it, we would join forces with our other disability allies and we would go to war. I mean, that also cutting those things does not fit well with what is supposed to be the progressive part of progressive conservative philosophy. I know there's a lot of people that don't think that Doug Ford represents the progressive part very much. But he'll learn very quickly if he tries to cut anything to do with disability funding. He'll be met with a loud
He'll have a problem
reaction.
on his hands, for sure.
A big one.
Megan asks, quite simply, Mr. Ford could make a 2-minute presser, I think she means press conference
Yeah.
or something, on the OAP, Ontario Autism Program.
Yeah.
Promise parents that giving choice won't mean that vulnerable families will be left languishing on lists forever, and that the government will work to ensure ABA is regulated, safe, and standardized. So just talk a little bit about regulation.
Wow.
With ABA, please.
Okay, so
I know, and I'm asking
Sorry.
you to be,
Carrie's saying we're nice bookends to Bruce. Yes. Thorn between two
Thanks,
roses.
Carrie.
or as my mother would have said, a bologna sandwich. So
Oh, that makes
Come
you the
on.
bologna.
Come
Yeah.
on.
I'm fine with being bread.
it was a joke,
You're corned
a
beef on rye.
self-deprecating joke.
Okay, go.
Hey, it's the meat.
Regulation.
So here's what.
I'm a vegetarian. Go.
Okay,
Regulation.
so regulation right now, unfortunately, is stalled. The
But not for long.
the previous government put the matter forward to the Ministry of Health, which is the one responsible for putting regulation in place for health professionals. They have a committee that is called HPRAC, the Health Professions Regulatory Advisory Committee. They did hearings. That's all in the can. The report is not yet back.
Good. Okay, can I push on?
We're waiting.
Yeah.
Go.
It's important.
Can
Yes,
I just
please.
go back to her question?
Go back,
I think what she's asking is, couldn't we ask Doug Ford to just come out and say these words that would reassure our community so much?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is, boy, would I ever love it if he would do that.
Yeah.
But you got to understand that there's like 180 other groups around the province that would love the Premier to come out and say the thing that would be really reassuring to their community.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the chances of us getting him to do that are pretty small. I know it's hard because we hold on to every word that the government says.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a while, I think, before we're going to be able to hear the reassuring words that we want.
Yeah.
But I always will judge a politician on their actions more than their words anyway.
You betcha.
Yes. Well, I imagine, we do know that a lot of people were very personally affected by some of the things that Mr. Ford said.
And he never addressed that during the campaign.
He didn't address it. He didn't really want to talk to us during the campaign. We had another Facebook Live where we talked about, we don't know what to think about Mr. Ford because where's the platform? Where's the response? Can he take responsibility for what he said? Can he turn it around and show people that that may have been an unfortunate thing to say? I don't know. Like, what do we want from him? This is not easy stuff, and we certainly respect that there are many people who are part of the OAC who are on the autism spectrum who were very personally affected by.
And a lot of them had meltdowns on election night.
And we understand that, and what we are saying is that we need to talk to him. We need to confront him, and we need to make sure that people have the supports that they need.
Listen, we've had no difficulty in the past. One of the nice things about being in the position that we are is that we're used to politicians. I don't get starstruck easily anymore, and I really no longer care what they think of me. I care that they respect me, and I certainly won't be afraid if we get into a room with him to say, look, I know you don't want to talk about those comments that you made, but our community definitely needs.
Our community would like to hear from him. Yes?
In order to build trust, and we weren't afraid to say those kinds of difficult things to the Liberals. We certainly won't hesitate now.
Yeah. So Megan continues, just ask Doug to say something of substance to prove to us that the PCs care and to try to quell the anxiety of those who fear there won't be support for those who need it most. I don't know if we want to quell anyone's anxiety because we don't know what the deal is, but we certainly want people to work towards making sure that our government doesn't let us down.
Look, I think the thing that I've really wanted to say over the last couple of days, and I haven't had a chance to, is that, it is not true that the election of Doug Ford means that everything that we've ever wanted for the autism community is now going to come to fruition because it's a new day in Ontario. But likewise, it is also not true that the sky has fallen and we're all going to die and we're all going to lose our funding. The truth in politics is always somewhere in the between, and we have to accept that as much as some people in our group, I would dare to say many people in our group, didn't want this outcome, the people of Ontario did, all debates about electoral systems aside. So we have to give this government a chance.
And we will work with them. We will. Colleen asks, I have questions. Does anyone have any sense of whether we will lose SSAH, Special Services at Home, or ACSD funding now?
No. Oh gosh, how do I do this quickly?
We have 9 minutes.
We may lose or we may not gain as much as we had hoped that we would under the Liberals. I do not believe that the books are in as good shape as they have been portrayed. I believe that the deficit is far larger, and there have been statements from both the FAO and the auditor,
the FAO?
The Financial Accountability Office, and the auditor, who both believe that it's potentially twice as large as it was being portrayed by the Liberals. So here's the thorny bit. There's things that you can't touch. You can't cut healthcare. You can't cut education. The third, it's a much bigger fight than some of the more vulnerable ministries further down the pecking order. Right. By the way, the third big expenditure that you absolutely can't cut is the third expenditure line on the province's books, debt service.
Paying
just the interest that we owe. And you can't get out of that.
Yeah.
So collectively, all of that adds up to over 80% of the Ontario budget. So the other stuff has to come out of smaller things, and social services is always a vulnerable target, right? Because paving roads and building bridges and keeping prisons open and testing water quality and things like that are things that, I worry.
Good. Can I move on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Angela, send me that email.
Yeah. Angela's made a note saying that she has it on good authority that one MPP has said that ACSD funding would increase. I hope you're right, Angela. Sherry, our friend Sherry Caldwell, asks, can the OAC formally collaborate with other advocacy groups, i.e. direct funding for all disabilities and all therapies, ABA, IBI doesn't exist anymore, PT, physical therapy, OT, occupational therapy, SLP, speech and language, speech and language pathology.
Yes.
Thank you. AAC, assisted,
augmentative and assistive communication technology.
Visual therapy. Woohoo! Well done. My brain, all the Diet Coke just kicked right in this moment. How can we create a larger base? So can we collaborate with other
it's funny that Sherry sent in that question because we were at her house this morning doing exactly that. So yes, of course we can collaborate. And those of you that have connections in other disability communities, the Learning Disabilities Association is one that I've tried to make contact with and haven't followed up on nearly enough. Of course, we collaborate with Sherry at the Ontario Disability Coalition and Sharon Gavison and the work that she does on behalf of adults, and David Lepofsky and the AODA Alliance. But if you have
AODA?
The Ontarians for Disabilities Act.
Access for Ontarians with Disabilities
That
Act.
thing.
She's amazing.
Too many acronyms. But anyways, if you have connections with, I don't know, organizations like the Special Olympics, or people with cerebral palsy or fetal alcohol syndrome, and those, definitely, like, when I've said a couple of times, we'll go to war. If we go to war, we're going to need all of those organizations to come together and be ready. If they try to make cuts to something like special services at home, there's even a special services at home coalition. So we'll need to join with all of those organizations to fight.
Tara asks, I would like to see Ford's accountability fall into school board funding for autism and see how it all really adds up. It's more of a statement than a question, so I'll just move on.
I'll give that some snaps.
Give some thumb snaps. Yeah, some snaps. Okay, we've got 5 minutes. Yehudis. She says, I agree with Sherry Caldwell. Yes. I think it's time to join forces to help all with special needs. Hear, hear. So much money is being wasted on bureaucracy and useless consultative services. Let's work for help for all children and adults, regardless of diagnosis. Our united voices will be stronger. Guys, why aren't we doing any work on passport funding and housing and issues that adults face?
Because we don't have the capacity. We don't have the
haven't
staff.
Got there yet, and my God.
And to be perfectly honest, I mean, when Sharon went and started her organization, I felt like, you know what? The best thing that we can do is amplify that. You know, the work that she's doing, and Mary Beth Rocheleau, and those that are further ahead of us in terms of the age of their kids. But, you know, we are a volunteer organization, and there's only so much that we can take on. I want to take that on. I totally do.
It's always been in the plan. Autism doesn't end at 5, autism doesn't end at school, and autism doesn't end at 18.
But we can't do all of the things.
Yes.
I mean, if there's people that want to step up into leadership positions and help us on that, and I mean, that's always the way that we've operated, is like, you know, if you look at the OAC and go, why aren't you doing this? Our response is always, please come help us do that.
Yes.
But there's only so much of us to go around.
And Edward and Yvonne point this out. And of course, there's the housing issue. We're not going to live forever. What happens to our kids? It's a great question.
We were talking about that this morning at Sherry's house, and there's so much work to be done on housing, on employment, on all the adult issues. And maybe we need, you know, I was recalling this morning that we organized that Big Tent conference back in 2009, and
it keeps coming up.
Yeah, and we put the call out to everybody in the autism community that was very fragmented at the time. There was a lot of sort of splinter organizations. We got them all together at Holland Bloorview and had a meeting and sort of figured out what we could agree on. And I think there's a place for disability-specific advocacy. But I also think there's a time and a place for alliances. And it may be that we need to do a little of both. Maybe we need an autism big tent. Maybe we just need a disability big tent. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we need to check out sort of how the government is going to respond to the disability community first before we try to organize that kind of big meeting. But I have to say to our members that are watching, you know, if you think that's something that the OAC should be doing, then please be prepared to step up and volunteer to stuff delegate kits and help, you know, book space and fundraise for us, because I don't know how the hell we're going to do it.
Yeah,
you know, we'll need help.
It's a difficult prospect given how stretched we are right now to deal with the OAP issues and the education file. At our last board meeting, we asked of our youth group, led by older young adults, to start looking at what they think, as people on the spectrum, what they think ought to be part of an adult strategy. And we'll put some language to that and polish it up and turn it into a formal ask to government. And I'm not sure how fast that process can move. And there are other groups that we will have to coordinate those ideas with. But I just want to say, as a bit of a warning about those things, that the more things that we try to do, the more difficult it becomes to do any one of them well.
Mm-hmm.
And the more messages that we try to participate in sending, the less loud our own message becomes, and the overall message simply becomes noise. So our responsibility is to children and youth and people with autism and their families. That's what we focus on.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do those other things, I would love to. I would love to end global hunger and have world peace, but I would much rather keep doing what we've been doing and focus on one thing and get results.
We hit an hour almost perfectly.
Okay.
Just to close, I don't know if either of you can do this quickly, or you're willing to. But for Laura, let's see if you're willing to.
They can whip me into things you wouldn't believe.
In terms of the immediate future, so let's just say within the next year.
Yeah.
Are either of you willing to make some predictions on, say, ABA in the classroom and what's going to be happening with the OAP? Or share a fantasy? Share something fantasy.
This reminds me of a lecture that I give in my law class about the Canadian Constitution. The title is Visions, Dreams, and Nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
And I have...
Can't improve on that.
It's a good lecture. I won't make any predictions at this point. I will predict that it will be chaotic. It will be Trumpian in style. There will be scandal. There will be controversy. But that some work will get done. But until we know, like at this point, we don't even know who's in cabinet. We don't even know how many cabinet positions there are. So, I mean, to predict how anything is going to go, I think would be kind of reckless. I mean, do I have visions of how I hope it will go? Yes. They're all in the education report.
Yes.
That's the vision.
Check out our education report on our Facebook page, as well as the story of the Ontario Autism Coalition's history.
Yeah.
It's on there too, which is maybe needs a little updating, but
yeah, actually, hey, anybody
good.
Out there want to help us update the OAC webpage, because it really
needs some freshening up. We have a volunteer right over here behind the scenes.
Best daughter in the universe.
Yeah, predictions about the OAP in the next year. Are you feeling good, or are you feeling scared?
I'm reluctant to make predictions because I don't think I know enough about which way some of the ground is tilted. I am an optimist about getting improvements to the funding model, getting the DSOs into line. I am less optimistic than I would have been under the Liberals about services in schools, although I'm starting to see
traction there.
I think that there was a route, but it's a different kind of a route with this government. Adult services, I don't even have an inkling.
You know what I think might be possible on the education front? I think if we frame the mess that is the special education funding formula properly and show them that, I mean, this would resonate with a conservative. The Liberals were very good at throwing money at the education system, and they were proud to brag that they had increased spending more than any other government had on the education system. But if you look at, okay, but did that money have an impact? Did it get to the places that it needed? The answer is no. And so if we can look at trying to find ways to ensure accountability for the funding that is invested, like I kind of think that is in a conservative wheelhouse.
Well, that's what I meant by
there's a path
root.
there too. Right?
You know, so the Conservatives talk about accountability and effective use of the taxpayer's dollar.
Yeah.
So in funding education, and particularly special needs education, that's not being done terribly well. And Hugh Mackenzie's recent report for ETFO lays that out in
Elementary Teachers Federation budget.
Sorry. He lays it out in very clear terms, and he shows the historical development of the mess that we're in. Mm-hmm. And basically what's happened in a short sentence is the use of the money has been decoupled from the needs of the student.
Yeah.
It no longer bears any relationship to need. It's all done with mathematical calculations and predictive modeling, and it's no longer based on what kids require. So I think that trying to get this government to come back to doing things in that way would have some appeal, although it's the Conservative Party that started that process that was completed by the Liberals. But as Andrea Horvath was famous for saying, she wasn't Bob Rae, and that was then, this is now.
That was then, that was now. Yeah.
Doug Ford is definitely not Mike Harris. So
this is a whole new ball game. So we're gonna wind up in just a couple of secs. Laura wants to point something out.
No, I just want to show you something. If you know what, I want to again go back to giving our members something to do.
Yes.
While we're doing all this waiting for the cabinet to be appointed, for the government to get to the point where it's meeting with stakeholders like us, it's much easier for you guys out there to go and get a meeting with your local MPP. It's much easier for you to find them at a community event, for you to pick up the phone and call them, to send them an email, to tweet at them. And if we want to go back to what we were talking about, education funding, because schools winding down, IPRCs, IEPs, all of that, ABC, EIEI, oh God, there's a lot of acronyms in this business. P.S. I think there's an acronym survival list on our website somewhere.
It's pretty good.
It is good. But if you want to talk to your local MPP about how the education funding formula isn't working, go to page 10 of our New Horizons report. And I don't know if this will work on the camera, but that is what the education funding formula actually looks like. And if you can't read it too well, basically it's your worst nightmare from calculus class. And I think the easiest thing you can point out to them is that bears no resemblance to a formula that is needs-based. So if we can all go out there and speak the language of needs-based education funding, then I think we'll be advancing our cause.
Yes. Is there anything else that people can do in the meantime while we're waiting for things to get sorted and shuffled?
Help us keep the pressure on for getting FaceTime. Like Laura, well, you both said, there's
share
going
the
to be
tweets.
Tons of people out there with an ask. We need to make sure that we are among the loudest, the clearest, and the easiest to work with. So yeah, keep the tweets going. Email your member, phone your member. You'll start to see the phone numbers soon. Laura has noted that some of them are starting to convert their Twitter handles into something that says MPP rather than...
Oh, hey, I know something members could do. I'm not sure when in my life, but sometime in the next couple of days, going to create a Google Doc that lists every riding in the province and who was elected and which party. And then if we can crowdsource getting addresses of constituency offices once they open, Twitter handles for the candidates, and phone numbers. There's a number of disability organizations that need access to that list, but you guys can help us build it through the wonder that is Google Docs. P.S. Somebody was asking earlier about our Twitter account. It is @ONT Autism. So if you're having trouble finding us, message me on Facebook and I'll send you a link.
Lovely. Well, thank you, everyone. Also, thank you so much for making Facebook a little bit more of a positive experience since the election. It's been nice to see a lot of supportive and thoughtful posts over the last few days. It's quite a relief to us, to say in the least. I am going to approach Michael Couteau and see if he'd be willing to do an informal Facebook Live with us, just like this, and we'll chit and chat and poke his brain a little bit. Maybe someone like Monique, as I was saying, just thinking maybe Monique Taylor. See, we have the same brain. Maybe Monique Taylor.
I am a dead man.
that I'm hoping that she would. Monique Taylor was one of the first and strongest advocates for us when the H5 cutoff was attempted, and she's been a friend to the OSC, as well as a number of other Conservative politicians, NDP politicians, and a couple of Liberals here and there too. So we like friends, and we like to talk to people who want to listen, and vice versa.
It's okay, so, Brent. You can hit rewind. Brent just got here. So we're going to sign off. We did an hour and 10 minutes, 10 minutes longer than an hour. But thank you, Laura. Thank you, Bruce. Wow, these two. I can't. They are the Michelle and Barack Obama of the autism world. God. No, don't even.
Okay,
by that analogy, then, you're Oprah.
I'm Farrah Fawcett. Okay.
Ooh.
Good night.
Okay. What a great way to end it.